Hi, Deirdre Virvo here. Welcome to Let's Talk Seniors, Memory Care Issues, Alzheimer's, Dementia, and Parkinson's. Today we have a very special guest, Joan Reed Wilson, who is an attorney here in Connecticut, and she specializes in elder law, among other things. She practices in the areas of estate planning, elder law, Medicaid planning, conservatorships, probate and trust administration, and real estate, all things transactional. She practices in Connecticut and California and is the vice president of the Connecticut chapter of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. So she knows her stuff. She's also an active member of the Elder Law section of the Connecticut Bar Association and accredited with the Plan of Connecticut for Pooled Trusts, if anybody's familiar with that. If you're not, she'll tell you a little bit about it. And the Veterans Administration to assist clients with obtaining aid and attendance benefits for long-term care needs, and with the Agency on Aging's Care Link Network. So if you have a senior that you need some help with, tune in. And without further ado, we have Joan Reed Wilson. Welcome, Joan. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, well, you have a pretty impressive background, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into all the elder care help?
Sure, thank you. I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm back home. I did practice in California for 5 years right after law school. I graduated in 1997, so I've been practicing for about 23 years. And right after law school, I worked for a couple of big firms and found myself very unfulfilled and realized that I really wanted to work with families and individuals. So I started an estate planning practice, and I moved back to Connecticut when I had my children, started my own firm in 2002. And as I developed my estate planning practice, I had more and more clients come to me asking for help with their parents or their grandparents even, because they were facing some long-term care issues. And so that's where we really developed our elder law practice and helping families through the whole continuum of their care needs.
That's super. Now, are your parents still with us?
They are, yep. They live in Florida with a lot of our other clients who go down there after living in Connecticut.
Well, I'm from New York, and it's kind of a requirement that if you have grandparents that are from New York, they have to go to Florida at some point.
Right. Yeah,
it's a pretty big requirement. So tell us a little bit about the pooled trust and the Veterans Administration associate benefits that I don't know if a lot of people know about the pooled trust, which is pretty specific.
Right. The pooled trust is a really important aspect of long-term care planning. And there's only a certain handful of attorneys who are on their accredited list to do the pooled trusts. And they're mostly for elder planning for long-term care. They're mostly important when somebody's income exceeds the income cap. And one of the myths that actually I hear a lot is that somebody can't qualify for the home care program, which is a program that the state pays for the home care, which can be $6,000 to $8,000 a month. So it's a big benefit if you can qualify for it. And a lot of people are told, even by other professionals, that they don't qualify for that program and they shouldn't bother applying because their income is over $2,300 a month. But the pool trust is a way that you can do a workaround if your income exceeds that cap. So it's a necessity if somebody is applying for the Connecticut Home Care Program for elders to pay for the home care that they might need if their income exceeds a certain amount. And we can use it for other uses as well, but that's a big one that we use it for.
So can you explain what the pooled trust is? And I always thought it was for when you have like a married couple.
Not necessarily. It's the pool trust is run by the Plan of Connecticut. It's a nonprofit organization. It's the only entity in Connecticut that's authorized to manage these pool trusts. And they originally started as being trusts for special needs. If somebody had an accident and they needed some expensive care and they really didn't have the money to pay for that care, and then they came into a lot of money because they may get a settlement because of that accident, there's a way to put that money into a special needs trust so that the person can continue to get the benefits they need. And then it also developed into the trust that I was talking about earlier for the excess income. So the plan of Connecticut, which is the nonprofit corporation, has its own board that vets the trusts and qualifies the trusts. And they also have trustees that they employ who manage the trusts.
So somebody would come to you as an attorney because you have a specialty in that. And
right.
Then are you on the board?
I'm not on the board, but the plan of Connecticut only allows certain attorneys to be accredited with them, to be ones to write up the trusts and submit them to the board to qualify for pool approval.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, why do I think it has to do with married people? Can you put it in, like if you have a house, can you sell it and put it in your spouse's name? Or why do I associate it with that?
I don't know why you would associate it with that.
It's nothing to do with that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are married people who could have it as well, but that's usually not one of the things that we used for married couple. It's mostly if the income is in excess. It's not the best planning tool in terms of putting a lump sum in there, because anything that stays in that pooled trust when the person dies goes to the plan and doesn't go back to the family. So it's not an ideal asset protection trust, but it does serve its purpose for certain needs.
Mm-hmm.
The VA aid and attendance is a stipend that's paid by the VA. If the person is a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran, they have to have served during a certain defined war period. It's not every single veteran, it's certain periods where they served. And they can receive a monthly stipend if their care needs exceed their income. So it's a 3-pronged test, but it is very helpful, especially if somebody needs just a little bit of care at home and might need a couple of $1,000s to help offset the cost of that care. It's very helpful when people are going into assisted living or memory care, because oftentimes their income is not enough to cover the cost of those communities. But if they can get the stipend from the VA, it will really help lengthen the amount of time that they can live there.
So, Joan, could you be on Medicaid and get that stipend?
You can. Yeah. Once you're on Medicaid, though, it depends on which Medicaid program you're on. But generally, Medicaid is going to pay for the bulk of your care needs. So if somebody is getting a VA stipend and then goes on to Medicaid, especially if they're in a nursing home, the VA stipend pares down to about $90 a month, because there's no cost. So the VA's, the third hurdle of your expenses exceeding your income kind of goes away because the Medicaid program is paying for those expenses.
That leads us to our topic, Medicaid versus Medicare. I guess my question about the VA is, let's say you're home and you're on Medicaid, but you don't need nursing home, but you need some assisted living help at home. Mm-hmm. And, just make that being level so you can get some help from aid in attendance with the VA. You use that to have somebody coming into your home to help you?
You can, and I've actually used it when in the assisted living or memory care situation more, because if somebody's in assisted living or a memory care community, the room and board there is not covered by Medicaid. But if somebody needed some additional help, because even if someone's in assisted living, they might still need an aide to be with them. The assisted living community is not going to provide that round-the-clock care that someone might need. So we have clients who are in assisted living or memory care and have an outside aide. That aide potentially could be paid for by Medicaid, but the room and board would not. So we have a couple of clients where we have them on Medicaid paying for the home care, and then we also have VA helping to pay for the room and board of the assisted living because their income is not enough to pay for that room and board. It's a complex calculation, and they're pretty unique situations because the person's income has to be close enough to pay for that room and board so that the VA is enough, because otherwise they don't have the income to pay for it because they're on Medicaid. So there are ways to patch together all these different benefits programs.
And that's what you do.
Yes, we try.
Okay.
I like puzzles.
You're like the money locator. Okay, so now what is the difference? So Medicare is when you're under 65, or is it also when you're over 65 and you just have assets?
Oh, it's Medicare is over 65 and it's your health insurance. So everybody who turns 65, well, almost everybody. Some people who've only paid into a municipality type of a job might not get Medicare, but for the most part, everybody who turns 65 gets Medicare, and that's their health insurance. So the health insurance is going to pay for your doctors and it's going to pay for hospitals, but it is not going to pay for custodial care and continuing care. So that's where Medicaid sometimes steps in. I think the big confusion between the two is they both do cover some form of your health care, and they have very similar names, but otherwise they're quite different in what they cover and who can qualify for them, because Medicaid is more of an asset-based qualification. You have to have only a certain amount of money and a certain amount of income, whereas Medicare, you can have all the money in the world, you can have really good income, you could still get that health insurance.
With Medicare, do you get to choose your own doctors?
Mm-hmm.
With Medicare,
yeah, in fact, right now we're
how about
not
Medicaid?
necessarily. No, because both programs, the doctor has to agree that they're going to take Medicare or Medicaid. Most doctors take Medicare. I know there's a little bit of a push in the last decade or so where doctors are turning to be concierge doctors. They're not taking any insurance at all. But for the most part, all doctors take Medicare, and hospitals have to take Medicare. But we're in the middle of the annual enrollment period right now, which is a time that everybody should look at their Medicare program that they're on, because if their doctor is not accepting the plan they're in, or a lot of times prescriptions fall off of people's programs, now is the time to look at your plan and reevaluate if you're in the right one.
So when you say plan, everybody gets Medicare, but then they can choose like plan A, B, C, D, something like that. What?
Right.
How does it work?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
So
you have to pay for those.
Right. The basic Medicare plan is about $140 a month, and that is usually taken right off of someone's Social Security. So when they get their Social Security deposit, it's net of whatever they're paying for Medicare. But then they have a choice of what plan they want for that Medicare. And they also have a choice to get supplement plans. So that's where a Medicare agent, and now's the time to meet with a Medicare agent and go over what are all the new plans, because the plans change every year. So right now, the Medicare agents are out there educating everybody about what the new plans are for 2021. And even if you were happy with your plan this year, it's important to know what the plans are, because they change and your health situation changes. So this is the time to go over that and decide, do you want to stay in the plan you're in? Does that still work for you? Maybe you want to supplement, and it all depends on what your anticipated health needs will be for the next year.
It's like, Joan, what are the supplements? Like, what is plan A? What's plan B?
Well, Medicare A is the plan that pays for the doctors, the hospitals. I mean, Medicare Part B pays for the doctors. All the others, F, G, there's a whole bunch of them. I don't know the details of all those because I don't sell Medicare plans. But there's plenty of Medicare agents.
You get to choose in their add-ons, like, so it's not comprehensive, just getting Medicare Part A. You have to, do you have Medicare Part A and B if you have Medicare?
Right, yes. You have,
and
you
then
have
the others are optional.
Right, exactly. And they might have, higher premiums, but lower copays or no copays. It's very similar to looking at the possibilities for your health insurance when you're under 65, if you're having a choice of what you can choose for different health insurance.
So that pays. Now, what if you're still working and you're covered under a regular insurance plan? Do you still get Medicare? Do you have to take it?
You have to sign up for Medicare when you turn 65. And if you don't have, if you can't prove that you have other health insurance. So I've had clients who opted not to, or just didn't realize that they were supposed to sign up for Medicare when they turn 65. And then when and if they do, years later, they get penalized for not paying into the system when they turn 65.
Oh,
So
but what if you're working, like as a teacher still, or working as a
If
whatever?
you're working and you can prove that you had insurance, you're okay, but you have to be able to prove that you had that. You can't just say, I don't need any prescriptions, so I'm not going to sign up for it, because the way that the payment structure works, it expects that everybody who's of that age is paying into the system. So if you say, I'm not going to pay for it until I need it, then you will get penalized for not paying into it.
So, Joan, I'm from New York, and I realize here in Connecticut, there are people that didn't, now it might be the same in New York, but that didn't pay into Medicare, I guess. Teachers, railroad workers, there's some people, I guess they have their own plan. How does that work?
It's the same. The client I was thinking about earlier was a teacher, and so she did not pay into the system, and when she went to add it in later because she wanted it, she had the penalty for that. But if she just stayed with her own plan, then she would have been okay. But she wanted to tap into the pharmacy plan of Medicare, and she had to pay the premium for not signing up for it when she turned 65.
Wow. Okay. So if you don't have the additional plans, there's additional costs, and you do have to pay for this $140 a month.
Right. There is a Medicaid type of benefit called the qualified Medicare beneficiary for low income people who make under a certain amount, and the amount depends on if you're single or you're married. But what that does is it's a state benefit that pays for your Medicare premium. A lot of people don't know about that. And if people are struggling and they are only getting Social Security, and maybe their Social Security is $1,800 a month, they potentially could get that $140 back by the state paying for it.
Oh,
you have to apply.
But if they're eligible for that, why don't they just go on Medicaid?
Because they might have assets. So you could have $200,000, $500,000 in the bank and still qualify for QMB to pay for your Medicare premium. It also would pay for your co-pays. There's 3 different levels to this QMB program. It's called the Medicare Savings Plan, but it's all based on your income. It's not based on assets. So it's an easier qualification than fully qualifying for Medicaid. And the other thing with Medicaid is you have to functionally qualify for Medicaid. You actually have to have a need for care. So if somebody doesn't have a need for care, but they're just struggling financially because their income is low, they could potentially apply for the QMB program, have the state pay for that premium, and it gives them a little extra money every month for their
So
needs.
QMB stands for Qualified Medicare Program?
Beneficiary. Yep.
Beneficiary.
Yeah, it's the Medicare Savings Program, MSP, QMB. There's a lot of acronyms in elder law.
Medicare Savings Program is the one where you are on Medicare, but you could get the $140 a month back by qualifying. So you could have a few $100,000 in the bank, but if your income is low, doesn't matter. Can you own a home?
Yep, you can own a
You can
home.
own a home and have income or money saved, but if you're only getting your Social Security is low, then you don't have to tap into your savings.
Right. Yeah. It basically, lowers your expenses every month, or it increases your income because your Social Security is going to be a little higher. They're not going to take that Medicare out of it. And for people who are on expensive um, pharmacy drugs, it could be a really big benefit because the copay that might be owed under that plan is also covered if you're on the QMB program. So it could be a really good benefit, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about, especially if they don't meet with a Medicare agent every year. Usually, the Medicare agents, if people are meeting with them, will bring it up as a possibility, and it's a pretty quick and easy application. So something everybody should really.
But you said if they meet with a Medicaid agent, right, or Medicare?
Medicare.
Okay. So when you turn 65, is there a place you go to sign up for this? Is it just online?
I recommend that you meet directly with somebody who's a Medicare agent, and it's not like necessarily like in your town. Sometimes the towns will have them in their town halls, but they're private health insurance agents who focus on Medicare. So they're all over the place, and it's a free service. They'll meet with people for no charge.
They're all over the place. They're just hanging out at the mall.
Yeah. I have a long list of it. If people want to know some, I can share some names of people that I know.
Excellent. So you turn 65, you call a Medicare agent, and then every year you talk to them again, just like you would a regular agent if you had your own insurance, and see what's new, what you might want to know. And is it in writing somewhere about these other things that people don't know about, or they're supposed to just tell you about the Medicare qualified beneficiary plan and all?
The QMB program, I believe the application is on the state's website because it's a state program. So that's something people could do that on their own if they wanted to get that application and file it on their own. So.
Nice. So what do we have to know that people don't know besides a qualified Medicare plan and these plans? What else? What are the secrets that you want to share?
Well, do you want me to go through my myths here?
Okay. Do you want me to put up your PowerPoint?
Sure. We talked about a lot of them already, so I'll try to scan through.
Full screen a bit. Beautiful. Let me take
Can you see it now? Okay. So these 10 myths are the things that I hear all the time in my office, and I've put it together in this fashion so people can really understand what the truth is. So the first one is that Medicare will pay for long-term care like an assisted living or a nursing home, and that's false. As we discussed, Medicare is your health insurance. It's not going to pay for long-term care. And I think one of the reasons people get confused about this is Medicare does sometimes pay for short-term periods in a nursing home. If somebody is in a hospital and has a qualifying stay, which is usually a 3-day stay, and then they transfer to a nursing home for rehab, that rehab can be covered by Medicare, but it's because it's a skilled need. So once that skilled need is gone, they don't need the physical therapy anymore or the wound care, then the nursing home is going to say, okay, you're being discharged from Medicare. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to leave. It just means Medicare is not going to be paying for this anymore. There's no skilled need. That person may need to stay in the nursing home. And so then it's a question of who's going to pay for that. You're either going to privately pay for it, which can be $450, $475 a day, or you're going to potentially transition to a Medicaid situation where you're going to spend down and trying to qualify for the state to pay for that. Medicare does not ever pay for assisted living. So that's the first part of that list false. Myth 2 is if you transfer your assets to your spouse, you can qualify for Medicaid. So Medicaid is based on the assets that you have. But if you're a married couple, the state looks at your assets in the aggregate, all of the assets that you own as a couple, whether it's all in one spouse's name or all in the other's name. It doesn't matter. The state makes you add it all up, and they consider 50% one spouse's and 50% the other spouse's. But it doesn't really help when you're trying to figure out if somebody qualifies to just simply put it in the spouse's name. And I think why people sometimes think this is the truth is because they've heard that you can transfer assets between spouses without a penalty. And that's true. It just does, and the reason it's true is it doesn't help with the qualifying process. Part of the process of qualifying for Medicaid is eventually we will transfer assets between spouses, but first you have to take that full aggregate amount and split it in half and figure out how you're going to spend down that 50% that is owned by the spouse who's applying for Medicaid. Myth 3 is one that gets most people, that they're allowed to gift $15,000 per year to their children without penalty. And a lot of people have heard this, or they've heard it's $10,000 a year. And it's true for gift and estate tax purposes that you are allowed to gift $15,000 per year per person. You can give it to your children, you can give it to their spouses, you can give it to your grandchildren, you can give it to the guy down the street. It doesn't really matter if they're related to you. You can give $15,000 per person per year and not have to file a gift tax return. And that's helpful if you have a taxable estate. Most people don't have a taxable estate anymore because the estate tax exemption is so high. But it's not exempt if you then apply for Medicaid. So when you apply for Medicaid in the state, you're looking to see if you are below the asset levels. They also want to see what you've done with your money. So there's the 5-year look back that a lot of people have heard about. You look back 5 years previous to your application to make sure that you just haven't given away all of your money to qualify for Medicaid. So if you've given away this $15,000, it can penalize you from receiving Medicaid. Myth 4 is, we talked about this a bunch. I reviewed all the Medicare options when I retired, so I don't need to review them again. And that's not true. A lot of people think once they turn 65 and they pick their plan, they're good for the rest of their life. But the plans change and your circumstances change. So every year during annual enrollment period, I recommend highly that people review their plans. And the annual enrollment period is from the beginning of October to the beginning of December. So it's a pretty short window. And if you don't make that change then sometimes you're stuck for the next year in that plan. Myth 5 is when my spouse or I'm placed in a room in the hospital, we have been admitted to the hospital. And this goes to the thing I was talking about with somebody leaving the hospital after 5 days or 3 days and going to the nursing home, and that nursing home stay being covered by Medicare. It's only covered by Medicare if the stay in the hospital was a qualifying stay, and that you have to have been admitted into the hospital in order for it to be a qualifying stay. But a lot of people have been put under observation. And I think a lot of people have heard about this now, but when it first started happening, people weren't aware that they weren't actually admitted to the hospital. They were only under observation. And so that entire stay in the hospital was not a qualifying stay. When they transitioned to a nursing home after their hospital stay, it wasn't covered by Medicare because they were only under observation.
How does one become a qualified stay? That seems like a little bit of a...
It's hard. It's not really up to the patient. So the reason behind it is Medicare was penalizing the hospitals for readmissions. So they didn't want the hospitals to get paid for taking care of somebody, that person go home and then be readmitted for the same exact thing or a similar thing, because they basically wanted to give the hospitals incentive to figure out what's wrong with this person and fix it. And if they got readmitted for the same thing, then Medicare was saying, well, you didn't fix it, you didn't do a good job, so we're going to financially penalize you. So to get around that, the hospitals were not admitting people. They were putting them under observation. If there's ever a chance that the hospital thinks we either don't know what's going on or we think that this could happen again and we're not going to be able to fix it, they're going to put the person under observation so that when that person does come back with the same issue, they don't get financially penalized for it. So it's ultimately up to the doctor to determine if the person has a medical condition that is worthy of being admitted or under observation. At
So,
least now they're supposed
so
to tell people.
Joan, what is your recourse if a doctor keeps you in the hospital for a week and says it's under observation when you have something going on and then you can't get any help at home from Medicare?
There is a really good nonprofit that's actually based right here in Connecticut called Medicare Advocacy Group, and they have some literature on their website about appealing the Medicare decisions. I don't think that they're very successful a lot of times, unfortunately. And even if they are, it takes months or years to really get through the whole process. So by that time, the family is well beyond whatever medical issue was causing them problems. So there's not a lot of recourse to change the minds of the physicians or to recoup any money that's lost. But at least now they are required to tell the family and the patient, you're under observation. So rather than just transitioning to a rehab facility, the family might find another way to safely discharge the person. Maybe it's safe enough for them to go home.
That's a slippery slope, John, because honestly, if you go into the hospital and you're elder and you're told you're here for observation, I would still consider that being in the hospital. I would still
it definitely is. I mean, you're in the room, you have a room. It's not like you're just in the ER. You have a room, you're in the gown, you're eating the food. It's awful. And when it first started happening, people weren't even told. So they didn't know. They didn't know until they got to the rehab facility, and the rehab facility said, well, this isn't covered by Medicare, so we need $7,000. Give us it was thousands of babies. Yeah.
So doesn't your need to go somewhere and you need Medicare, doesn't that prove isn't there some sort of proof that you weren't there just for observation?
No, I mean, it's that qualifying. I mean, I think I agree with you. I think it should be changed. If the person has a skilled need, Medicare should still pay for it. They shouldn't be making this distinction whether somebody was admitted or not. So there's problems with the way that the law is written from Medicare's side as well. But I think there are times when people could get the safe discharge and get the physical therapy that they might need to get stronger at home. They don't necessarily have to go to a rehab facility, which is going to be a lot costlier. So people are able to make that choice if they know that they're under observation.
But there have to be some things that are obvious, like, you break a hip, you have a hip replacement, that should be covered by Medicare. But it's
that's not usually the type of thing that you have a readmit for. It's more happens more when a lot of times if they just can't tell what's causing the person to come in, they don't know if it's going to happen again. So, but if there's a fall and a break, those are all covered, because that's not something that they're worried is going to happen again next week, and they're going to be financially penalized for that.
Wow.
The other thing is, a lot of the nursing homes in the area were aware that now this is a big issue. So most of them offer a discounted rate for the first 2-week period following a hospital stay if you didn't have a qualifying stay. So as opposed to the $450 or $475 a day, they're offering $250 a day. And at least they were before COVID.
That could be a little shock.
Yeah, it's a huge shock. Yeah. So that's a big one. Myth 6 is I'm a veteran, so my long-term care needs are covered by the VA. And this is not true. We talked about the aid and attendance as a stipend, but just because somebody is a veteran does not mean that 100% of their long-term care needs will be covered.
What if they go to a veteran hospital or a veteran? Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, the hospital though is the hospital is the hospital. It's not going to be their long-term care, and there is a facility here in Connecticut that covers long-term care for veterans, but there's not enough room for every veteran to be able to go there. So unfortunately, there's not enough space to cover every veteran.
Is that free to veterans?
Yeah, if they qualify for that facility, but there's not enough of them. Myth 7 is life insurance policies are not counted when determining the value of my estate for Medicaid or estate tax purposes. So in the asset calculation for Medicaid, when you're trying to determine how much money someone has and if they qualify for Medicaid, life insurance is included if there's cash value in that life insurance. So that's something that sometimes people are unaware of. You might have a $20,000 policy that's meant to pay for your funeral, and it has a $5,000 cash value to it, and that would cause you to be asset for Medicaid.
So I guess also any whole life insurance would have cash value, most of them.
Right.
So basically, if you have term, that's probably when you're safest.
Right. If you have term or you have group, then there's no cash value in those. It's when there's a whole life or variable life that it has the cash value. And unfortunately, if you wait until the last minute and realize that you have this, then a lot of times the only way to handle it is to cash it in, and you might be losing a lot in the differential between the cash value and the death benefit. And the same for estate tax purposes. When someone passes away, the life insurance death benefit is included when we're calculating the estate taxes. Again, most people don't have to worry about estate taxes anymore, but when I first started practicing, the estate tax exemption was $600,000 per person. So there were people who, when you added up their home and their retirement account, and then especially when you added in the life insurance death benefit, would put them over that exemption. Right now, the estate tax exemption in Connecticut is $5 million per person, and federally it's $11 million. So most people don't get up to that point, but who knows what'll happen with the estate tax exemption. Those are always changing. Myth 8 is I can transfer my house to my children without penalty, and that's untrue. Any transfers that you make within that 5-year look-back period potentially can penalize you from receiving Medicaid when you apply for Medicaid. And I think the reason why a lot of people think that this is true is because they hear that the house is an exempt asset, and it is. It's considered an exempt asset if you're living in it. But if you've given it away and then you apply to the state for the Connecticut Home Care Program for Elders or for Medicaid in the nursing home, it's still a 5-year triggering penalty. And the way that the penalties work with Medicaid is if you've given anything away in that previous 5-year period, the state takes the value of that asset and divides it by the average cost of nursing home in the state, which is now about $13,000 a month. So if you've given away a house that's $260,000, you're going to be penalized from receiving Medicaid for 20 months. So it can then at the time you have no money left, because when you're applying for Medicaid you have no money left. So you have no money left, and the state says we're not going to pay for 20 months. Who's going to pay for it? You're kind of stuck in a bad situation there. There are some exemptions for transferring the house to children, though. So if a child has lived with somebody for at least 2 years and they've taken care of them, there's a potential that we could transfer that house without penalty. Or if a child is disabled, we can transfer that house. So there's a lot of different complexities to the Medicaid qualification and application. Myth 9 is that a living or revocable trust protects your assets from long-term care expenses, and this is untrue. A revocable trust is a trust that is fully revocable by the person who created it, and usually that person is also the trustee, so they're fully in charge of the money, and they're also usually the beneficiary. So because they have full control and they have full use of the money, it's not protected. If and when you have any long-term care expenses, the state's going to expect you to use that money for yourself. And I think the reason why people get confused with this is because of the word trust. It's used in a lot of different vehicles, in estate planning vehicles. An irrevocable trust, where you transfer the money out of your name and out of your control, and you're not the beneficiary, the assets in that trust might be protected. But if it's a revocable trust, then it's not protected. The reason somebody would do a revocable trust is if they want to have a probate avoidance plan. So that's a way to avoid probate. You put your assets into a revocable trust.
Why would somebody use a revocable trust at all?
If they don't want their family to go through the probate process. So when you die, any assets that are in your name alone, not jointly with anybody else, if they don't have beneficiary designations like a life insurance policy, then those assets have to go through probate. So if you have a checking account in your name, if you have a piece of real estate in your name, all of those assets, even though you have a will, they have to go through the probate process, and it's time consuming and it can be costly, and especially if there's factors involved like an heir that you're afraid might contest the will, or if you have out of state property, sometimes there's really good reason to want to avoid that whole process. So in order to avoid probate, you have to take all of the assets that are in your individual name and get them out of your individual name. And you do that by transferring them to your revocable trust.
But why wouldn't somebody want to do an irrevocable trust if, there's a 5-year look back and they wouldn't have to pay?
Whatever you put into the irrevocable trust is not yours anymore. So you have to be careful with what you put in there. I don't recommend that people put all of their assets into an irrevocable trust, because then they have nothing, they don't have any assets to use. So a lot of times in the asset protection planning plans, we will put the primary residence because it's a valuable piece of their estate, but we don't put the bank accounts because we want them to be able to spend their money and use it. And if they put it into the irrevocable trust, they can't touch it. It's not theirs anymore.
Can you have two? Can you have an irrevocable trust for your house and a revocable for everything else?
Yep. Yeah. We've had plans where we have multiple irrevocable trusts as well. But yeah, if you said I want to put my house in the irrevocable trust, get that part protected, and then I also want to avoid probate, but I have the savings accounts that are in my name alone, then we would put those in a revocable trust. So it's really all about what the person's goals are and figuring out how the plan can meet those goals. And the last myth is, if I do nothing, the state will take everything. This is probably the one I hear the most, that if they don't do something, the state's going to take it. And that's not really the way it works. The state is paying for the Medicaid benefits, but they're only going to pay for it if you otherwise don't have any money left. So the state is looking at what you've done with your money to make sure that, again, you don't just give it away, so the state will pay for you. But the state will, if they do pay for somebody for months or years in a nursing home or at home and have accumulated a big debt, if that person has any assets when they pass away, the state will put liens on those properties to try to get paid back for the money they pay. But they don't take anything. So when you're in that spend down mode where you're trying to get qualified for Medicaid, it's not the state that's taking the money away, it's you using it for yourself for paying for things.
So, Joan, I do a lot of short sales, and a lot of people, a lot of elders have the Department of Social Service liens on their home because they've been in a nursing home, but they still have a home.
Yeah.
Is that what happens? Like if you have a home and you have to go into a nursing home,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
sold your home yet?
Right. So because the home is an exempt asset, you can qualify for Medicaid and still own a home. First, if you're in the Connecticut Home Care Program, which is the Medicaid program that's going to pay for home care, you're allowed to own a home, and you don't even have to, be actively trying to sell it because you are living at home, so it's exempt. So people who are on the Connecticut Home Care Program might be getting, $6,000 or $8,000 worth of care every month, and maybe it accumulates over a few months or years. When they die, if that house is still in their name, that's when DSS is going to put the lien on the house and say, okay, now that we're not paying for care for you anymore and you don't need this house anymore because you've passed away, we would like to get paid back, and you have this asset of this house, so we're going to put a lien on it.
What about when they go into a nursing home and DSS puts a lien on the house?
Well, it's similar. The house is no longer exempt because you're not living there, but you could still qualify for Medicaid and own a piece of real estate by making it an inaccessible asset. And the way we do that is we list it. So part of the Medicaid application process is we have to show there's a listing agreement for this home, because they want to see that you're actively trying to sell it and trying to get some liquidity to pay for your care. But if you pass away before the house is sold, and in the meantime, the state has been paying for your care, the state again will have a debt that they'll put against the house to try to get paid back because the house is still in the person's name.
Very interesting. It's different per state.
Right.
Medicaid is state by state. Is Medicare as well state by state?
No, that is well, it is. Yeah, actually, the plans are all state by state. Medicare is a federal program, but each of the plans that people go over every year, those are all state by state.
Yeah, I was surprised to find
Medicare.
I was surprised to find out that Medicaid is as well, like a pool of money per state, and the state determines what they'll do with that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And every state has their own rules. Connecticut is probably one of the strictest in terms of what they let you keep.
Yes, and also what you can do with that, because I'm moving my aunt currently to Arizona, and doing a spend down for her, and she's going on to Medicaid and can get into assisted living there, paid for by Medicaid, which is very hard to do here.
Yeah, so, there's only four assisted living communities in the state that take Medicaid. One thing that Connecticut does allow that a lot of states don't is the home care program. There's quite a few states that only allow Medicaid to pay for a nursing home. So that's a nice benefit that we have here. People can potentially stay in their own home with the Medicaid benefit.
Well, Joan, you've been so helpful. Do you have any last minute tips for us? Any parting words?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I think we covered most of it. Just be proactive in your planning. When there's
proactive in your planning.
Yeah.
Call every year. When you get on Medicare, call every year and make sure you go on when you're 65.
And when there's a diagnosis, dementia, Parkinson's, something like that, make sure your attorney is at least one of the fourth or fifth call you make. I know attorneys are not the first call people make when there's a health crisis, but it's a good idea to keep them in the list and keep them in the loop, so that they can keep updated.
You should call elder care attorney.
Right. Yeah. Yes, because there's a lot of things that we can do even with estate planning if we're not doing asset protection or Medicaid. There's a few things that we can do to protect using wills and probate. So it's always a good idea to keep your elder law attorney in the loop of what's going on.
Yes, and I'm working with a few people now that are like, you need to get conservatorships and POAs, and they're, they have dementia and their families just didn't recognize it early enough. And now it's, kind of a little tougher to do than, if you give them this.
I
power of attorney
recommend everybody 18 and older get a power of attorney and a healthcare directive. I do that in the high schools. I go and send them letters to say, as soon as somebody turns 18, get your power of attorney, get your healthcare, and then obviously update it. I recommend to my clients, and we send letters to our clients every 3 years to review their estate plan. So you can change the people over time. But if you end up in a situation where you have no power of attorney, you have no healthcare agent, and then you lose capacity, it's a much costlier, much more time-consuming situation where you have to go to probate court and get the person conserved. So it's much simpler to have a power of attorney.
Joan, you just said something important that I also just learned, actually yesterday. So when you do have a power of attorney, you do have to keep getting it updated, because if you have an older power of attorney, it might have been usurped, or I was told that anybody could just say, you're no longer my power of attorney, even verbally, and you're no longer the power of attorney. So that lawyers are looking for an updated power of attorney, a more recent one, so it won't be contested. Is that so?
Yeah. Well, and even banks, what I tell people is that the financial institutions don't like to see the document go stale, and to banks, something that's older than 6 months, they get worried, because like you said, the bank doesn't know if that principal has revoked this power of attorney. So they like to see updated ones. Now, I don't think people are going to update it every 6 months, but certainly every couple of years. And the law in Connecticut did change in 2016. So there's a new form, which I think everybody should have. It has a lot more good terms in it for the principal. But always a good idea to get that updated regularly, even if it's the same people.
I mean, without you or an elder care attorney, how would anybody know a thing like that?
Probably when they run into problems.
That's what happens. That's what's happened in this case, that's for sure. So, I know, it's just so many laws and so many things to know. That's why it's good to go to an advisor that knows what they're talking about. So, Joan, you've been most helpful. I hope you'll come on again and talk to us more about the elder. There's so many nuances to every rule, every law. Even if you just think of a POA and it's 5 years old, you could run into a lot of problems thinking you have it covered, so it's really good to deal with an elder care attorney. So Joan Reed Wilson, attorney, elder care at law, 860-669-1222. And what city are you in?
I have an office in Clinton and Middletown.
Clinton, Middletown, but you probably cover the whole state.
Yes, I am licensed.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope to see you again soon.
All right, thank you.
And we'll talk behind the scenes.
Okay.
Thanks, Joan.
All right.
Bye-bye now. That was Joan Reed Wilson, elder care attorney at law. Boy, she knew her stuff. There are so many nuances, and I'm learning them every day. Just even as simple as having a power of attorney that's outdated. How many people are watching that are thinking, oh my gosh, my power of attorney is 5 years old, thinking of that set. Another important thing that she said, not even about the elderly, is if you are 18 years or older, you need a healthcare directive and a power of attorney. Even if you're married, your spouse is not your healthcare directive automatically. You need to name them as such. So very good things to see your attorney about if you haven't done so in the last few years, and get those going. But thank you everybody for watching, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Until then.
Hi, Deirdre here again. Thank you for joining me on Let's Talk Seniors Memory Care Issues. Is this an issue hitting home? Do you have a parent or loved one with memory care issues? Hi, Deirdre here again. Thank you for joining me on Let's Talk Seniors Memory Care Issues. Is this an issue hitting home? Do you have a parent or loved one with memory care issues who you feel is not safe at home anymore? Are isolation, falls, and safety issues becoming a big concern? Welcome to Dogwood Senior Home, premier boutique residential senior living specializing in memory care. It's country living at its best in the Huntington section of Shelton, Connecticut. We're truly a home with only 6 senior residents living as one family unit. Senior residential homes are a concept sweeping the nation with 47,000 across the U.S. We're pleased to open Dogwood Senior Home as it will be only number 6 for Connecticut. Brand new, sparkling clean, opening mid-June. And safe, safe, safe. We are COVID-free. Residential care homes boast a very low COVID infection rate across the nation. This is due to the intimacy of size and speed in which the caretakers can shift to accommodate immediate needs. They are much safer than the large homes and facilities, as you can imagine. It has been documented that residents have less falls and a better quality of life in a residential home environment. Our home is more affordable than the big box facility. You pay one all-inclusive price, and that price is guaranteed for the life of the resident. With an incredible 1-to-3 caregiver ratio, which you won't find anywhere else. Our friendly, loving caregivers are dedicated and trained in Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's issues. We're only taking 6 residents, so the home will fill up fast. Call me at 203-689-7562 for a talk and tour. I would love to meet you and your loved one. See you soon. Bye.